Firing your top performer is one of the hardest calls a leader can make. Our guest today did exactly that and learned that making the right decision is only half the job. The other half is how you bring your team along with you. Stay tuned for another great episode of Bad Boss Confessional. Hi, I'm Beth Fahey, and welcome to Bad Boss Confessional. I've been a leader for over 30 years, and I'll be honest, I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. The thing is, those mistakes taught me more about leadership than any success ever did. This podcast is where we get honest about the moments we'd rather forget and discover why they're the ones actually worth remembering. Each week, I talk with leaders who aren't afraid to share their worst boss moments and what they learned from them. Because here's what I know. Every great leader has a story they're not proud of. This is where we tell those stories. Before we get into today's confession, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors who make this show possible. Do you love running on EOS? Try Streti, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Streti free at streti.com. That's STRETY.com. Streti, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Titus Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry-leading guarantee. Best part? Titus Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at titustalent.com/EOS. We spend a lot of time trying to fix how we work. New systems, new habits, new routines. My next guest would tell you that most of us are working against our own grain. David Kolbe is CEO of Kolbe Corp and a co-developer of the Kolbe A Index, the only proven assessment that measures Conative strengths, the instinctive ways people take action when they're free to be themselves. David, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me on, Beth.
So tell me what conative means.
So broadly speaking, there are three parts of the mind, two of which we kind of all know about: the thinking and feeling parts, the thinking, the cognitive, what you've learned, how smart you are. There are all kinds of cognitive tests, kind of the obvious ones, IQ tests, but even, a grade school spelling test is a cognitive test. Did you learn how to spell those words? Then there's the affective part of the mind, which is the feeling part, the emotions, the preferences, the desires. There are all kinds of affective tests. So most listeners have heard of the Myers-Briggs, MBTI or DISC, Predictive Index, StrengthsFinder, and a number of other really good ones. And by the way, hundreds of fun but not very reliable ones you can find online too. So those are the two parts of the mind that people know about. This third part of the mind, and this concept goes back thousands of years to Plato, so literally the ancient Greek philosophers. But the third part of the mind is the conative. It's not how we think or feel, but it's the way we take action. So it's all about the doing part of the mind. It drives the patterns of the way we act rather than how we think about things or feel about things.
So this is somebody's natural wiring, right? Like how they're wired. They can't change their conative scores, right?
Yeah, we've done test retest studies and it seems to be very stable. So what people can change is the way they use their conative strengths. So it's not like, oh, this is so rigid that you can always 100% of the time know exactly how somebody's going to act. Of course not. So, but it does drive the way we will take action. So it's not can or can't. And we'll talk about, what we measure and how to describe it. Just a little thing so I can give you an example. one of the things that we identify is what we call the fact finder action mode. It's how we deal with gathering and sharing information. So look, everybody can gather and share a lot of information, but some people are just naturally wired to do that. Whereas other people are wired really to simplify, to just focus on, hey, I only need to know the 2 or 3 most important things. All the other stuff is just extra and not important.
Hmm.
We can shift that when we really put our minds to it, but it's not natural for us. And therefore, if we are forced to operate that way all the time, it's not going to feel good. We are not going to be as productive. We're not going to be as successful over the medium to long term.
So this is that phenomenon of the square peg in the round hole.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned before the conative part of the mind is not as well known. I mean, even the word conation is not as well known. This part of the mind is not as well known. So what happens then is so many people, because they don't understand that this part of them even exists, they focus so much and they're taught to focus so much on what they don't do well and, okay, get better at that. Oh, you're not good. And I'm putting that in quotes because I don't know that it's necessarily true, but I'll stick with this fact finder example. Oh, you don't gather and share enough information. Well, you need to get better at that. You need to do that. Do you really? Or should you instead focus on the way you work best with information? I mean, they're all strengths. Somebody who has a strength in being able to simplify, to look at a giant field of data and identify the 2 or 3 most important things, what an amazing strength that is. But if what you're taught is, oh no, you should always be seeking more detail, more this, more that, in terms of information, that you're wasting your strength. And by the way, you're also not going to be probably as good, and it'll be harder for you to do it the other way. So when I say probably be not as good, that's in the short term. Maybe you're so smart, you can do it in that other way and be better than 99% of the people, but it's going to take a lot more energy for you to do it that way. So you shouldn't.
This is all so great. I mean, we're familiar with Kolbe, of course, as EOS implementers because we teach a workshop on Kolbe in our quarterly sessions. And we're familiar enough with it to teach it to other people, to have them take the assessment in our quarterly sessions. And it's always very helpful. I'm always the one that wants to do it immediately because I want to know who's in the room, but we tend to wait a little while because there are more important things for us to focus on initially, like LMA and 3-step process documenter. I will say that once I get the Kolbe results for my teams, it's so nice to have that shorthand, not just for me, but for them as well. So even in the world of implementers, when we come up to each other at QCEs, sometimes one of the first things we say after "What city are you from?" is, "What's your Kolbe?"
Yeah, I love that.
Because,
And by the way, we run on EOS here at Kolbe. So I'm CEO, but also visionary at Kolbe Corp.
yeah, that's amazing. So it's so great that we have this overlap because like we get you, you get us, and so then as implementers, we're bringing this Kolbe home. And I jokingly, before we started recording, I was telling you I have all of my family's Kolbes on my phone, which I pretty much have memorized at this point because I'll cite them so often, right? So it's handy. And now my daughter, she started dating this guy and he's a great guy. And she's like, gosh, I wonder what his Kolbe is. And I said, do you think he'd take it?
Well, A, I love that. B, you may not know about this, but we actually have a relationship
Ooh,
analyzer is the best way to put it. You can go to TWO.com. And
okay.
if they've both taken their Kolbe A indexes, they can just go in there, identify where they took it. They just put their 4 numbers and their email address. It'll pull those results in, and then they can get a report that looks at the 2 of them as already being in a committed relationship. This is not a dating site. It's not a matching
Yeah,
service,
yeah,
but it's for 2 people. And it's kind of like 2 people who work together in a company, but it looks at it from the personal relationship
yeah.
standpoint and talks to them about like how they do with vacations and communication in a personal way. I love it. We don't talk about it a lot because most of the clients that we help are businesses, but it's actually one of my very favorite things.
Yeah. Well, I know you're here for the confessional, David. So I am going to come
No,
back
don't
to
make me
all of my
confess.
geeking. I'm going to come back to all of my geeking out on Kolbe, but so you're the CEO of Kolbe. You've been running. How long have you been involved in this organization? Since you were 12?
Well, let's see. The company, my mom started the company, first of all.
Yeah.
So 50 years ago, a little over. So I've been involved since I was 9.
Okay.
So a long time. As you mentioned in your intro, to say I was like the co-creator of the Kolbe A Index is too generous for me. I was helpful and helped develop the scoring algorithm, but really my mom created the index itself. Um, but yeah, she was an inveterate entrepreneur, started other companies really before she got involved in doing what we do now. So I was involved proofreading stuff, sticking labels on envelopes, because mostly what the company did when she first started it was educational publishing and mail
Hmm.
order house. But as a grown up, I've been at the company for 28 years, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I never remember exactly how long I've been CEO, because the way I like to describe it, since it turned into a family business, it really didn't start out that way. But um, I had many of the responsibilities of CEO before I had the title, and I didn't have all of the responsibilities until well after I had the title. And I think the
Hmm.
people in the audience who took over from a parent founder, I
Hmm.
think that's the common experience for
Yes.
most of us. But anyway, I've been CEO a long time now.
Great.
So yeah.
You have a story, I'm sure, a confession to make. Let's just get that out of the way, and then we'll come back to all the Colby stuff. So tell me.
I mean, I have so many. It's hard to like narrow down all the mistakes, but one particular one I think comes to mind. And I'll frame it in, kind of the context of EOS. Uh, Values and a company culture are so important, and that's part of what EOS not just preaches but teaches and helps companies with, and we've certainly done that, and we try to live that. So this one particular time, business had not been as good, and we had just had an all hands meeting where we brought the team together, and we were kind of laid it out there. And most people knew that business wasn't going as well. You can sense that even if you're not looking at all of the numbers every week. um, and we'd said, hey, business isn't great, but we're committed to, we're going to turn this around, and we are not going to lay anybody off. We're going to, do everything we can to turn it around quickly, and, kind of dot, dot, dot. You can imagine the kind of discussion it was. And it was really about getting everybody's buy-in to say, look, we need to be in this together as a team. We need to bear down. We need to work hard. We need to be smart. We need to support each other. Literally within a week, our number one salesperson, we found out, was spending tons of time messaging, calling, emailing his girlfriend, and doing it with company resources. So we weren't really trying to track all of this down, but it just became really obvious. And when I say we, it was really me. I made the decision. We have to let him go. Other times we might have sat him down and spoken to him, but the value was, look, we had just talked to everybody about how important it was that we come together as a team, and we really, work extra hard. And it just, I'll try to pick my language correctly. It really got under my skin. I'll put it that way, that right after having that discussion, this guy's spending so much time on non-work stuff during work hours on work resources. And it's just like, you know what? It's not what he's not. He is showing that he's not aligned with our values, that when we explicitly said we need to come together as a team, he's not operating like a teammate. And we had a discussion. He could have maybe saved it if there was some reason, like, oh my gosh, my girlfriend's parents just were in it. I don't know. There were those extenuating circumstances weren't there. So it's not a confessional yet, because it was the right decision. Like, I strongly felt then, feel now, that it was the right decision to make. But the problem was we didn't communicate it very well. I think it was for good. I think we had good motives. Our part of our culture is, look, when you need to let somebody go, it's painful for them. Like, you don't want to throw salt in the wound, make it worse for them. So we keep things relatively close to the vest. We don't want to trash that person on the way out the door. We don't want to go to the rest of the team and say, well, this person was doing X, Y, and Z, and aren't they terrible? And they weren't supporting you. And that's why we let them go. It wasn't quite silent, but we just kind of let the team know, hey, we were really sorry to have to do this, but we had to let this person go. There was just a void, though, of information. And what we didn't know and really couldn't have anticipated, and he's a generally good person. Like, we maintained some relationship with him for a little while. He, not really since, but we actually asked him, hey, how do you want to communicate this to everybody? We'll let you think about that. Please let us know so that we can, have a unified front in terms of what we want to tell people about your departure. Well, and he said, great, let me think about that. What we didn't know then until probably a couple of days later is he walked out the door and he started going around to people and say, can you believe it? They just, no warning, they just fired me for no good reason, and kind of burned some bridges. But the mistake on my part, was not being ready to give people enough information so they could understand. And we still didn't have to talk poorly about him or say unnecessarily harsh things, but we could have given people more information about why we thought it was a misalignment of values, and why we thought it was important that, given what we saw, we just take quick action, nip it in the bud rather than let it fester. In the end, we had to do a lot of that because some of our key people, like really good, committed team members, hearing his side of the story and just a void on our side of what happened, they kind of thought the worst. They're like, hey, he told us you just fired him with no warning and no good reason. And it's like, oh my gosh. We had to rebuild some of those relationships because their first impressions are so important. It was driven by we didn't control it enough. So yeah, again, I think we made the right decision, but we just didn't handle it well. And the other thing that's frustrating, and I think about this a lot, I'd love for there to be just an absolute crystal clear, oh, we should have done it exactly like this, and here's the 4-step process for handling a termination like that. It's never that simple. There are always going to be well, I shouldn't say never. Sometimes it's that simple, but those are the rare exceptions. They're usually gray areas and things you need to balance, pros and cons. Take the time to do those things, and sometimes change. So what we did was we relied on, hey, we don't talk about all the reasons with everybody. So we just stuck with our essentially pre-existing rules, not recognizing we need to bend them a little bit here. People are going to wonder why our top salesperson, and it was abrupt. It's not like we gave him a plan for improvement or something. But we felt it was justified. So I don't know, that's one of what could be many examples of hard lessons that I've learned.
Yeah, that's a common one. And I think everyone can resonate with that particular story because, we've talked many times on this podcast about the steps leading up to letting somebody go and how difficult that is. And they are all nuanced, and every situation is different. Looking back at how you handled it, if you were to rewrite it in some way where you handled it better, what would your steps have been looking back? Like, what would you have said in light of the
Yeah,
context?
I think we would have decided more upfront how we wanted to handle it rather than go into it and ask him, hey, how would you like to handle it? Think about it, let us know. We should have gone to him and said, here's the way we think we need to handle it. Do you have any, we can have a discussion. Would you like us to tweak that? And then we should have dealt with it more quickly rather than having him be the one to go out there and say whatever it was he was going to want to say. We could have done that together, perhaps, maybe co-written an email that we distributed internally, or immediately gone to some key players, the people that he worked with most closely. I think that would have been the main thing, is just have a game plan ahead of time rather than let, kind of be reactive to what he might want to do.
And that's the thing is like, who's controlling the narrative? And in that situation, he was controlling the narrative because, he went out and started talking to people about
Yeah.
what was happening. Um, and the thing is like, in the absence of information, people will make up their own stories.
Yeah.
So if they're just getting one version of the story, then yeah. So it's
Well, and so some of it was they made up their own, totally true. And some of it was he didn't make up, but he had his side, and his side was kind of building on what was true. We didn't give him warning and a chance to change everything. But so we didn't initially have a chance to explain to people why, and look, that was contrary to our to how we generally handled things. So it made it easy for him to go to other people and say, oh, they're being hypocrites, they say they're going to do this, and then here they didn't. Look how they handled this with me. And we didn't quickly enough explain why in this case, like, hey, we didn't give him notice, but we are giving him severance pay, and there were other things we did. So it was abrupt in terms of, the way it was handled, but it was because it was such a core value. It's like we're a team, and what he's showing is he's focused on himself. And when we had the entire team buy into how important it was to work together and really, so we wouldn't have to be laying people off or do other pay cut kinds of things, we all need to work together. He was out on his own, and he was taking lots and lots of time. And this is our top salesperson, which means he's going to make it hard for all of you guys to get paid because he's not talking to potential customers or existing clients. Um, he's doing these other personal things. And look, doesn't make him a bad person, but it means that it was not a good fit and we had to do something right away, or we would really be jeopardizing who we said we were.
what specific core value would you cite that he was in violation of? What are your core values?
It's the way we work together. It's, we're a team, an interdependent team, committed to each other. And he was kind of showing, no, and it was a little bit in his attitude too. It's like, hey, I'm the top
Mhm.
salesperson. You can't
Mhm.
fire me
Yeah.
because I'm the top salesperson.
Yeah.
What are you
Well,
gonna do?
that a tale as old as time, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And it may be true. And I know there's a stereotype around salespeople sometimes with that, but that's, we make a point with everybody here, uh, teaching them all. And it hopefully starts with me. Sure, I'm the visionary CEO, but yeah, there are lots of times internally where I am working for other people internally, like a salesperson. A salesperson, let's say an account rep with an existing client, when they come to me and say, David, I need your help. I would love your time talking to this client because they have some questions that I think you'd be best answering. I'm working for that account rep now. Doesn't matter that my title is CEO or visionary. Um, Same thing when I'm doing product development stuff. We have a project manager who leads that initiative. Even though I may set the big visionary goals, if I'm getting plugged in to, develop whatever it is, content, writing, I'm working for them. And when they say, David, you're scheduled at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, I show up at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. I don't say, well, I've got other things that are more important. I made a commitment.
I've had that experience as well. We've had to fire. So I had a bakery in my previous life before I became an implementer, and I had somebody on a Friday decide to take 36 cupcakes out of the case because they had a party to go to and not pay for them, citing that they were going to get wasted anyway. And I was like, well, on your way out, you can, take off your apron, please clean out your locker. And, this is effectively stealing, right? So I get asked by my clients all the time, the three strikes rule. Do you always have to impart the three strikes rule? And I said, well, if it's something pretty serious, then I think that you just have to make that decision at the time. And so then I always use that story. So it sounds like a similar story. Like it was just such a egregious violation of your core values that it merited it.
Since you've got me confessing stuff, another personnel related thing, and they're, I shouldn't stick just with personnel things, because there are definitely strategic mistakes that I've made that I've had to learn
Oh,
from.
for
But
sure.
on a personnel thing, there was a time not that long ago when I probably should have made a more quick, decisive decision about somebody. It wasn't stealing, but it was a big mistake. Didn't lie, but kind of hid some information. I mean, that's maybe a little bit strong way to put it, but not probably really too strong. But we thought, oh my gosh, they've been really valued, and they're such a nice person. They really are a very nice person. Um, so we kind of gave them an opportunity to change, even kind of knowing it's probably not going to work out. Well, what happened was, in the meantime, somebody who was directly affected by their mistake was
Mm,
so bothered by the fact that we didn't get rid of them right away. They're like, well, really, if you're going to put up with that, then I'm going to start looking for a job. And they ended up leaving.
mm,
Um, and that was not good for us. It was somebody that we didn't really want to lose. And so there I had to learn the lesson, like, okay, this time probably should have taken more quick, more decisive action, even if it wasn't immediate. It didn't necessarily have to be, okay, clean out your locker, you're done today. But maybe it was, oh my gosh, we're putting you on 30 days. This has to change. And if not, we're done. And there
mm,
must have, but we weren't that decisive about it. And in that case, we probably should have been. It was more of a
mm,
borderline. I'm not convinced that was the right way, but in retrospect, certainly given that the other person left, we probably
mhm.
should have. They didn't feel supported, was what it boiled down to. They're like,
Yeah.
what they did affected me, made my job harder. You're letting them hang around. Uh, Never mind. I don't want to be here if you don't have my back.
Mhm.
And I think they overreacted, but they get to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and we teach about this in Great Boss workshops all the time, right? So when the wrong people stay, the right people leave, or when bosses don't take care of the people issues on their team, sometimes that's when the right people leave. And you run the risk of ruining your own credibility as a boss if you don't deal with these problems expediently. And it's hard because these are humans, these are people that you like, and all of the reasons. It's just coming back to the greater good of the organization. I think that's just the litmus test really for leaders is like, okay, what's best for everybody? And those are the decisions that, what you're hearing in your gut is usually the one that is the right one.
Yeah.
And you just need to follow it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for the confession. I mean, I think that a lot of people will resonate with that. They'll recognize themselves in that story and the couple of stories that you told because it's, we're all so much in the same boat. And that's also another thing that I try to convey during Great Boss workshops all the time is that look, it's a journey. We're all learning. I mean, I'm 59 and I continue to learn what it's like to be a great boss. And I don't have it all figured out, and I'm going to make mistakes in the future. It's not over, right? Yeah. And so that's just what we're trying to convey with this podcast. So thanks for sharing. All right. So let's go back to Kolbe stuff because I find this also fascinating. So I took a not a certification course, but I don't know, next level course as an EOS implementer. And it was just fascinating to me how this all works. So let's get into some of the numbers so that we can kind of talk about what that means so that when we go up to people it's almost like having a decoder ring like on, on somebody, right? So what is your Colby score, David?
So my numbers are 8273. So what that means is, if you think about it in four strengths, I have strengths in, we talked about Fact Finder. That's that first one, the 8. So I do gather and share a lot of information. I research, become an expert in follow through, which is the way we deal with systems and structure. I'm a 2. So my strength there is being very open ended, adaptable. I can and will find shortcuts. Um, the next one is quick start. It's how we deal with the unknown, risk, experimenting. And with my 7, I'm very much a, hey, let's try something out. If it doesn't work, that's okay. We'll pivot, we'll try something new. And then the fourth one is what we call the implementer. It's how we deal with the tactile, tangible, literally three-dimensional parts of what we do. And there, my strength is in imagining. I conceptualize things rather than physically build them. So that's a quick one of my four strengths.
Oh, that's great. So an 8 and a 2, that's unusual. I don't usually see that. I usually see the fact finder and the follow through paired together more often than
Interesting.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
maybe
think
that's just my clients.
I think it's probably more your clients. They don't necessarily go together like that, like you're describing. But yeah, but and it's a good point. They're generally kind of randomly distributed in the general population. The scores go from 1 to 10 in each of the four action modes that I quickly mentioned. Um, Roughly half of the people are in the 4, 5, 6 range, and then uh, roughly 20% really on the extremes. I know that only adds up to 90. It's kind of give or take, and there are little kind of asterisks in there, but and they aren't correlated to each other, so they kind of go across the board.
Yeah, interesting. So my Colby score is 6672, which is 6 fact finder, 6 follow through, 7 quick start, and 2 an implementer. So I'm sometimes at odds with myself, I find.
So you lead with your quick start. So that's what I do too, also with that experimenting, taking chances. You're the kind of person where if you've followed a system or a pattern 4 times, 5 times in a row, I'd pretty much bet that next time you're going to do it differently. Not because you should or it's smart, just because you will. That's who you are. Now, where that might be a little bit of a conflicting part is with your 6 in follow through, to talk about systems and structure. You're a kind of, you generally follow systems, but because you need to experiment and take chances and try things new, you'll step outside of that. So that is an area where you might feel in conflict some of the time. A little bit
Mhm.
also with your fact finder. As a 6 in fact finder, you're not as far out on one end as I am in terms of gathering and sharing information, but you're kind of more toward the research, get information and details. You're more toward that side. Um, you accommodate or react to those needs, basically. So, what that might mean is you're about ready to experiment, but then there's that part of you that thinks, well, maybe we should look into it a little bit. That's more extreme for me. And actually, because I start with the detail, doing research kind of side of Fact Finder, I self edit all the time. I'll have ideas with my quick start, kind of those out of the blue brainstorm things. But my immediate reaction is, well, I need to look into that, do some research, find
Mm.
out whether it's going to work. And I kill most of those ideas before I even tell them to other people. So a
Mhm.
lot of times people don't see that in me as much as I see it in myself. That probably happens with you, just maybe not quite to the same extent.
Yeah, I tend to be fairly good at, sussing out my own ideas. Although there are the exceptions, the real clunker decisions that I've made over the years that where my quick start has gotten away from me, and no, this is a great idea. Really, buttermilk pie, everyone's gonna love it, I swear to God,
But
and
I love those stories, and it's like, yeah, buttermilk pie, you try it and it's no
yeah.
one likes it. Sometimes people learn, and almost because this podcast is about, oh, what were your mistakes and let's learn from them. I do want to caution people not to go too far to the other extreme, especially somebody like you, where part of what makes you you and what makes you successful is you do try things out that other people say she never should have wasted her time. It's not a waste of your time to
Mm,
experiment, fail, and learn from it. Now, if you failed and then just kept your head down and never learned, and I think this is why you have the podcast you do, it's like you're so focused on, well, sure, we're going to make mistakes. You, as an initiating quick start, know that especially.
mhm.
And I don't mean to say that quick starts make more mistakes. They're just willing to take more risks. And guess what? When you take more risks, you're going to have more failures. You're smart enough to learn from them. Some people have those failures and they're just like, okay, that's embarrassing. I'm going to ignore that and just keep going. those are the less successful initiating quick starts. They're still going to do it, but they didn't learn from all those other things.
Mm.
Um, but I don't want people to overreact. I don't want initiating quick starts to think, and this happens all the time, and it's usually not imposed internally. It's from outside. People say, "Yeah, you just need to stop." You know,
Mm.
you tried that and it failed. So the lesson you should learn isn't, well, let's learn from that failure and be better the next time I experiment and take a risk. The lesson you should learn is don't experiment, don't take risks. Just stick
Mm.
with the tried and true every time. You're now out of your game, and you are not going to be as successful over the long haul as if you maybe are more calculated with your risks. Maybe you bring a team along so that there are people who can appropriately kind of triage all those ideas. And this is
Mhm.
something that I see with quick starts all the time. The most successful ones tell their trusted team, oh my gosh, we should try this, we should try that. That team listens, doesn't
Mhm.
say no right away, doesn't say yes right away, because they learn that those initiating quick starts, most of those ideas will fall by the wayside anyway.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the ones that don't, whether that's a 24-hour or a 2-week kind of waiting period, the rest of the team can say, all right, let's look at these three things that we talked about. Let's say, in EOS speak, we talked about it at a quarterly a month ago. Let's put it on the issues list to talk about which of those ideas are we really going to pursue.
Mhm.
And then that team will come together and say, hey, we love these two ideas. The other ones, we don't have the time, resources, or they're just not very good ideas.
Mhm.
Um, those quick starts are the ones who are successful rather than the ones who learn, well, I just shouldn't take any more chances because I got burned.
Right. Or they don't listen to their team. I mean, I think that, my response to buttermilk pie and other plenty of other things was, I need an integrator, and I need to get out of the integrator seat because, I mean, I'm never gonna stop having ideas, and I know that that's what's driving the company, but, somebody else needs to check my crazy sometimes and say, that might be, let's wait a quarter and see if that would be maybe a better season for
Yeah,
buttermilk pie.
yeah. And I think this also, the visionary integrator relationship, talk about nuanced and never just one set of rules that's always going to be
Mhm.
applied. To me, it's so much of how do you think about stuff. So using your example of buttermilk pie, I would say, you know, as a visionary, what the direction you can set for the bakery is, we're going to be the kind of place that experiments and tries new things and
Mhm.
doesn't just rely on the same set of products that our people have always loved and we're never going to do anything different. We are going to try out new things. But then, and you can come up with buttermilk pie, but the team can say, hey, Beth, we know we're going to experiment. That's just not the one that's going to win. you know
Yeah.
we taste tested it internally. We made 4 of them and it is not going to be a big seller. So no. And then
Yeah.
the ego of the visionary can say, fine, it doesn't have to be that pie. And you still know, but they're not going to say no to all of my ideas. We're still going to experiment, take
Yeah.
chances, be that kind of company, that kind of bakery. Um, but it's a balance. It's an
Yeah.
interplay of how that all works.
Yeah, speaking of balance, I think this is another very interesting thing about Colby, and, I don't think that it's taken advantage of enough, is building teams with diversity. I mean,
Yep.
many times I've done sessions and I've done the Colby for a team, and the average fact finder is like 7.5. The average follow through is 7.2.
Yeah.
The average quick start is a 3,
Yep.
and then they're asking questions like, well, we're not really growing. We're not really, we're kind of stagnant. And yeah, that's interesting. I wonder
Yep.
why, and
Yep.
so can you talk a little bit about the importance of diversity on a team with
Yeah,
Colby?
it's crucial, and we've done studies with universities. We've done our own studies with our clients, and what we see over and over again is, all things being equal, the teams that have diversity of conative strengths do better. So Look, number one, you have to have people in the right roles. If you've got a CFO, generally speaking, those people are going to need to be initiating or close to it follow throughs. They need to be systematic and structured. There are exceptions for sure. Sometimes the way you manage your financial resources needs to have an initiating quick start, but that's pretty unusual. Um, but you have to have the other strengths as well, because for lots of reasons. Number one, just even if you're all on the same team working at the same time, you need to have, as I was talking about before, if you have yourself as an initiating quick start and then everybody around you is also initiating quick start, you guys are going to come up with all kinds of ideas. You're going to be chasing new things, doing things all that, you're going to be pivoting. You'll never be able to take advantage of, oh, this was a great idea, but we didn't see it to fruition. We didn't put the systems and structures in place behind that great experimentation that make it actually profitable. Or, we're just doing too many of them. So you need to have those counterbalancing strengths.
Mhm.
Two reasons it doesn't happen all the time. One is, as I mentioned before, people don't even understand this part of the mind. And what's natural is you gravitate toward people who are like you. So
Mhm.
whether it's interviewing somebody to bring them into the company or the people already inside the company, it's like, oh my gosh, they do things just the way I do. They're great. I'm going to promote them. And, I'm going to put them in these other positions. So you create this, what we call cloning of conative strengths. The other key thing about diversity, though, is as great as it is, it can create stress. It can create conflict, a particular kind of stress. And that's another reason people don't do it, is because it feels stressful. So if you get somebody who's very different than you are, they don't do things the same way, it can be frustrating. As much as you need them, it doesn't always feel good. Um, I just really would encourage people to bite the bullet. Um, and here's the other thing: it doesn't have to always feel bad, and that's, I think, one of the best things about understanding your own and the results of the Kolbe results of the people you work with, is it makes that feeling less painful and more like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I have somebody different than me. So um, a great example for me with my to and follow through. So I described it as a strength in being open ended, adaptable, finding shortcuts. It can be painful at times too, though, when there are things that need systematization and structure and organization, and that's not me. Thank goodness I've got the people around me who do that stuff naturally. And because they do it naturally, they tend to love it too. They help me do my job better. They help the company do better because we're different and we can fill in each other's gaps. But too often people, because they don't know it, they make judgments about it. So they start thinking, oh, they're just annoying bureaucrats. They make me fill out forms and, do those bureaucratic type things that just are painful for me because they're not natural. Once you learn they're different than you and that's a good thing, you thank them for it rather than getting annoyed with them.
Yeah. My sisters Colbys and we're different, and we were business partners. And once I knew her Colby and she knew mine, it's like we forgave each other for a lot of the frustration that we'd had our entire lives. It was like, "Oh, you're just, I'm a high quick start, you're a low quick start. No wonder we're in conflict about making decisions."
And so there's the
Okay.
backward looking forgiveness, which is amazing. And we hear that so often. And it actually warms my heart because I mentioned earlier how much the relationship stuff matters to me.
Mhm.
That's a business relationship, but it's also your sister. And there are times when that not understanding part it can create bad feelings because you really start thinking they're doing this to me or they don't appreciate who I am. And it's not appreciating, it's just not understanding.
Yeah.
The moving forward part is great. Now you guys know this about each other. The next time it happens, you can laugh about it rather than get annoyed at the other person.
Yeah. And, my husband has done a Colby as well. And, he's high fact finder, high follow through, low quick start. And he's like a 7 implementer. So the story I always tell when I'm teaching Colby to my teams is, there was the time I went out for a Christmas tree and came back with a big screen TV. Okay. And then there was
Wow.
the
Keep
time
going, but I'm
and
curious how that happened.
yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, my husband just every Christmas brings it up because, it's just so funny to him and it's so emblematic of my behavior apparently. Um, and then I always tell the story, like, as far as his goes, when we went to go buy a house, we looked for a house for 2 years. And it was like, finally the interest rates, they were about to jump. And I just said, dude, we have got to buy the house like now, like enough with these walkthroughs. And he had to literally walk through because he's a 7, had to see it, had to, and it was, and so it's just a testament to marriage because knowing his Colby, I'm like, well, this is just going to take a while. It's just going to take a while and that's okay. We'll get there eventually. But then finally, my quick start said, okay, like we got to narrow it down and pick one.
Well, and we haven't talked as much about implementer yet. So I mentioned before, it's how we deal with the physical, tangible, tactile stuff. That's why for him, he had to walk through because he needed to feel and touch and see the physical parts of the house. Whereas for other people, that's not as important. Also, the quality of construction and of the infrastructure of a house is going to be really important. So for people like you in that situation, I mean, one is, hey, dude, we've just got to move forward because there are these other things. The interest rates are about to go up. It's been 2 years, et cetera. Another thing that somebody in your situation can do to help that implementer is let them understand you're going to have a budget. So the parts of the house that aren't up to your specifications, because I know there were parts of the house that you bought that weren't good enough for him. And he's like, okay, I'm going to compromise on this. But if he knows I'm going to have a budget, it's going to get fixed and improved, that will make it easier for somebody like that to buy something that he sees as substandard because nothing's going to
Mhm.
be perfect. But
Yeah.
if
Were
you
you
tell
there,
somebody like
David?
that, no, no, I mean, we get that so often because it nails it. It does drive the way people do things. So I didn't
Yeah.
need to be there. I can figure it out.
So I have a couple more last questions around Colby. This is my fact finder follow through. Sorry, that's what's showing up now.
I love it.
But I would like to know if there's a difference between men and women as far as Colbys go.
There's not. We don't see statistical differences. Men and women generally, statistically speaking, get the same score. There are differences in the stereotypes. So I think we were talking just now about implementer. I think there is a stereotype that men are going to be the more initiating, tactile, tangible, hands-on people. We don't see that. So there may be some gender stereotypes that are true based on kind of cultural, the way people were brought up. So you might see, and I'm not advocating these, by the way, I'm just saying you might see men doing stereotypically male things with their initiating implementer, like maybe they're working on cars. So I'm a 2 in implementer. I don't get in and fix a car. Like that's not something I don't do it. I don't have an interest in doing it. I'm not good at it. Sure, I can put things together, but I should generally outsource that function. And I shouldn't feel bound by some gender-based stereotype that, well, men should do that. Um, the stereotype, I think, for women where there's a stereotype that they initiate is in the follow through. Well, women are the organized planner types, and they maybe are put in a role more often where, let's say a wife, oh, the wife should be planning the family's schedule and organizing everything. Well, that's not true. Like statistically, the women are not more initiating follow through. And if they're put in that position of, well, because you're a woman, we expect you to do this, that's a terrible allocation of resources. If the man in a couple is the initiating follow, the guy should be doing the systems and structure and planning. Um, so, yeah, I could give the even longer answer, but that's the relatively short one.
No, I appreciate that because I've seen the smattering in my own session rooms. And granted, I have more men than women, unfortunately, in my session rooms, but that's just how it is. But what I see is, I've got plenty of high quick start women and, lower fact finder, lower follow through visionary types, right? That generalization, but typically. I have lots of, higher fact finder, higher follow through men. But I was just curious because of stereotypes, is there something in the genetics that leans towards like those stereotypes? And I'm glad to hear actually that it's equal.
Yeah, we don't see differences by gender, age, or race or ethnicity either.
That's amazing. Good. We're all just humans trying to
Yep.
do the best we can, right?
Yep.
Genetically, do you see Colbys show up in families in certain ways?
Uh, Short answer, no. We've done some identical twin studies, relatively small, but they don't necessarily have the same Kolbe result. On the other hand, we see that people's Kolbe results don't change over time. Usually, when something doesn't change over time in a human, we think, oh, well, it must be genetically driven because it doesn't change and our genetics don't change. So it's an interesting question. We don't know how people get their Kolbe index, well, I shouldn't say Kolbe index results. We don't know how they get their conative strengths. It doesn't seem to be something that you learn. It's not taught to you. It doesn't, that's the changing over time part. If it were taught to you, you'd think, oh, it changes, before and after college or something like that, or after being in a career for 10 years, it's different. But we don't see that.
Hmm. Yeah, then maybe this is my own theory I'm postulating. So, in my family, my husband, like I said, is a seven implementer. So, again, how they handle tangibles, three-dimensional objects, things like that. My husband is a grip in the film industry. He works with tools. You're probably not surprised, right?
I am not surprised. I think that's
Yeah.
amazing. I love it.
I'm a two in implementer. So, when we designed our bakery, when we remodeled and did this whole thing, I saw it all in my head. The black and white penny tile, the red walls, the black chandeliers. Like when we remodeled, I saw the whole thing and knew exactly what it was going to look like. And my sister said to me afterwards, she's a higher implementer. She's like, I don't know how you saw that in your head. And I was like, I I don't know. But just that's how I saw it. Now what's interesting is my kids are in the middle between my husband and myself. And interestingly, they're all artists. So my oldest is an illustrator. He's a four. He has a four implementer. My middle child, my daughter is a makeup artist. She's a six. And then my son is a grip with my husband, and I think he's a five. And so that's what made me think maybe it is genetic. Maybe it just shows up, or maybe it's just environment and that's what they see. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
We don't know how you get it, but it doesn't appear that they got it because it's like the average of the two of yours genetically.
okay. All right. Well, that's
Someday, I hope somebody, whether it's Kolbe Corp, some medical researcher, I don't know, but I'd love to know kind of where it comes from, how
yeah.
it's driven, because it does seem to be hardwired into our brains. And we've done
Hmm.
some very preliminary look at QEEG research to look at kind of the pattern of electrical stimulation in people's brains, not at all at the level of how it got there, but just is it driven by different parts of the mind? And so we're figuring it out, but we don't know yet.
One of the things that I always ask my guests before they leave is the tattoo question. So if you happen to have seen any of these podcasts before or listened to them, I always ask my guests if you were to get a tattoo somewhere on your body that either, going back to your initial story about you know, communication, or maybe it's your Colby. I don't know. Maybe you would tattoo your Colby. But if there was something that you would tattoo on your body that would let us know a little bit more about who you are, I think the audience would love to learn about you that way.
I mean, the almost too easy answer is I could do an 8273 tattoo somewhere. I mean, I it's too easy, but that's probably it'd be that, maybe also or instead a little cross. Um, I'm very driven by my family also, so I don't know what the tattoo would look like. I've got 4 kids and a wife, so it'd be kinda cumbersome, and I'm not a big
Mm,
tattoo fan, so I don't want it to be like my whole chest.
right.
And there are a lot of names if I'm gonna put all the names, but I don't know, those are probably the 3 things that pop to mind.
Yeah. I mean, you putting your Kolbe on your wrist or whatever is probably akin to me putting an EOS light bulb on mine, and I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it either. I'm tattooless at this point. I don't know if I'll end life that way, but we'll see.
All right. Well, anyway, thanks so much for your time today, David. I had a really great time talking to you, and obviously, I could have gone on and on, but for our listeners' benefit, we'll cut it for today. But would love to have you back again and learn more.
Well, thanks for having me, Beth. It's been fun.
Thanks to David Kolbe for reminding us that values based leadership takes courage and that bringing your team along for the hard decisions is just as important as making them. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional. We'll see you next week.